Good day, Alan. Thank you very much for joining me again. This is the episode 2 of Interesting Chats with Alan about coaching. And, as we sort of started off talking about last week, and this is a good leader for us today, but we're talking about fear and the impact that has on our goals, both from a positive and negative way. So probably from a negative of how it makes us feel, but positive from how we can use certain tools, and and also coaching to make that basically an asset. What's if I had to ask you, what's your starting point in this discussion? I mean, you're great at starting these things off, and you get me to think deeper. So please go ahead.
Excellent, thank you, CD, and it's a real privilege to be on this recording with you today. And number 2. It's moving along, and that's fantastic. So we're talking about fear today, and you said to me, so what is the starting point? So the starting point for me to perhaps talk a little bit about this, and you will know this, is that we need to go back a couple of million years ago, because we're talking about the reptilian brain, and the reptilian brain plays a major part in our fear responses. So everybody has probably heard of flight and fight and freeze, but mainly flight and fight. Sorry, my tongue is getting over the F's here. But that is it's part of the reptilian brain. And we know that this is generally happens in the animal kingdom, but it happens to humans as well. So this whole premise that many years ago, that humans were really very kind of susceptible to danger. You can imagine somebody walking out on the out in the open, and they become prey immediately. And so this was where this developed. So it was really just a case of survival. And so this is all seated in the part of the brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala, actually, the role of the amygdala is actually to, it monitors what's going on as people move through their, their daily lives generally. And basically what it does, it will trigger off these responses even for the smallest situation. So there would either be fear, it leads to it could be just a kind of a confused, frozen state. But basically what it does is it forces you into a decision. And there are 3 things you possibly can do. The one is that you can run the hell away from that lion that is after you, or you can just fight it, which I think that decision probably is not going to work very well, or you could just freeze and hope for the best. So the interesting thing about this, albeit that this was millions of years ago, we now still have this capacity in our brain to do this, and we experience it in our daily lives.
Yeah, and people who know me well, and you knew the younger version of me, would know that I very often fought the lion. So in our coaching context, then we use what we try to achieve in our coaching context, and what we try to do then is to manage that emotional, basically I call it the emotional brain, but the amygdala. Yeah. That's fight or freeze response. And one of the tools we use is the SCARF model, SCARF assessment for people, which is basically what emotional stimulations that you have. And the first one we looked at, the S is status, then it's certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And those, there are other, you can also throw expectations in there, but there are other things that have an influence over that brain. And if you are able to manage those situations, and you understand what is happening right now in terms of your emotional threat, because unfortunately the reptilian brain still works in an emotional level, and if you understand what's going on and you actually are able to manage your awareness of what is going on around you. You've got that moment. It's a millisecond where you can switch from your emotional brain to your executive brain, which is your prefrontal cortex, right?
Exactly.
And that's a very difficult process, because your emotional brain is a lot faster and is not quick to react, because it's a life or death situation really that it reacts on, than your executive brain, which takes a little bit of time to process and decide. So you just once you understand that, and once you understand a little bit more of what's going on, it becomes slightly easier to manage your fears. But let's talk a little bit about that exact thing, and what fear means, and what are the things that we can do as coaches, but as people as well, just to first of all understand better and to manage it better.
All right. So I think that we need to acknowledge that the brain, unfortunately, is a very structured organ, and basically it does things in a very repetitive way. The other thing that it does is, because of the survival mode that it pushes us into, it processes things negatively. And a lot of people are going to be surprised about that. Why can't I naturally just be positive? But it doesn't work that way. So an example for me would, sometimes I would see an object. It happened to me the other night in the lounge. I saw this thing and I actually thought it was a snake. That was my immediate response, because we have a lot of snakes around here, but I didn't default to, it was something else that was positive, like a piece of candy that I dropped. No, this was a snake. And, immediately had this incredible away response based on that. Now, what we need to do is obviously recognize that in the first place, because you will never move forward if you are just in a fear-based situation. So the way that we've got to do that is start to processing it as a toward state. And that's what I think in a lot of what we need to do in coaching when we're working with people, is to acknowledge that this is the way that the brain will operate, and then help people to start to overcome that. But they have to overcome that by recognizing it first, and then start to gravitate towards being in a positive state. So that is why we do goal setting with clients, because that creates an opportunity for somebody to think positively of a future scenario without the fear attached to it. And by the way, even in that journey, there are going to be things like fear of failure, fear of success, and all sorts of other fears. So part of the managing of the coaching process is to understand that will occur and help your client, because part of their success is going to overcoming some of those challenges.
Yeah. I love the organic nature of our interviews, because I've got Dave the dog here next to me, and you got your parrot in the background singing to us.
He's awake at the moment and having his day. Yeah.
As long as we'll hear him chatting in a little bit.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's great. But I mean, that towards state and the way coaching works, because very often, and I have these conversations with people, and these are fears. Very often people turn around and go, but I can't change my career because of X, Y, Z, right?
Yes.
I can't open my business because maybe I'm not good enough. I'm not a good enough entrepreneur. I can't become what I want to become because I don't have the skill sets or anything like that.
Yes.
And what I always tell people, and it's in a way, it's the brain's way of basically saving energy.
Yes.
Because what is hardwired. The way you act is hardwired, and if you want to become better and if you want to learn something new, your prefrontal brain is very active, and that takes about 80% of your energy of your brain.
Yes.
And what then happens is that your brain is an energy saving, along with being a connecting machine. It's an energy saving machine as well. So it's very easy for your brain to go, no, but my automatic reaction is no, shift it into the subconscious and stay in your comfort zone, because that's where the least amount of energy is.
Yes.
So what those thoughts actually are to me, and this is a good way of explaining it, whether it's imposter syndrome, whether it's limiting beliefs, whether it's anything like that, is basically you need to recognize them as, indications of where your gaps are, what you need to work on with regards to what you want to achieve. And if you reframe that into, let's say I am not a great salesperson, and you need to reframe that in terms of, so what do I need to do to become one, to reach my goal and to get better? And in the coaching context, and because you're breaking bigger things down to smaller things, people have time then to think about those little things that stop them. And they in the coaching context work on those little elements. Because the other thing that people need to realize is that, you know what, it is intimidating to want to become what you want to become from a purpose point of view, but it is also possible if it's broken down into manageable areas. And we some people's purpose sits after 10 years worth of work. Sorry, no, Dave's shifting my camera. Some people's purpose sits after 10 years worth of work. Some people, but if you start with the process of within 3 months, you get closer to that purpose, you actually start realizing, and it mitigates the fear in terms of, I can do this. Look how I've grown. And it's sometimes in the small actions that teach people that can become better. That those fears are then mitigated, and then there's a lot of bravery. But at every single point in time, people will. I mean, because it's so your amygdala is so much quicker to react. There will be instances and moments where that comes back, and as long as you recognize it as that opportunity to understand it, recognize it, not be toxically positive about things. It's like, no, I can do this now. But to understand it, recognize it, and understand where your gap is, and then work on that. With a coach preferably, that makes a big difference.
And I think all of those points you've just made are really incredibly valid. And in fact, that thing about, I'm not a good salesperson is something I can really attest to, because when I was in Dubai, I had to go and see corporate clients. And I basically, in the beginning, I was absolutely petrified of doing that. And I had this thing, I'm not good at doing this. I'm not good at doing this. And one of the things I had to literally do, it was a survival thing. Either you do it or you're just not going to make it here. And the funny thing about it is that when you confront that sort of thing, it opens you up to understanding it better. And the problem is that most people don't want to go down that road. And I think that is what coaching does. It takes people down that road. And I remember surprising myself, and I think that's exactly what we need to do with clients, is that I actually liked going to visit clients. And then I started looking forward to going to see clients. So, I took that, it was more around necessity than anything else. But, I took myself from that severe away response about doing this. I used to have sleepless nights about it, to a toward response. It made me want to do more of it.
And that, and we'll sort of end off the conversation there, because I think what we'll talk about probably next is how that happens. But the last thing I sort of want to say is just that's why I like the coaching model, the results coaching, or the neuroscience-based coaching that we have, because we recognize those fears and we deal with those fears and we show that you can move forward from those fears. For me, there's no failure, there's only feedback, and that resonates well in that context, because you can then make it your own, right? Whereas going out and doing a sales course without getting a sales coach involved for you, or going out and trying to learn somebody else's model of how you do it, you try to implement that model into your life, and that doesn't always work. So what it is, and what we do, is that, right, there's the gap. What are you going to do about that gap to make it your own and to make it a strength, right? Because then that just makes a massive difference in how people see themselves then, because there's no doubt about whether somebody else is making me successful. There's a clear action that you've done, that you've empowered yourself on, because you've taken the responsibility of that, and you've gone through the discipline of making that change. And that has a massive impact and a massive shift for people, and in terms of what they can learn. I mean, you it's like you say, you went through that process of having sleepless nights to actually loving the process. And you know, and the beauty of that is you make it your own.
Yes.
You're not following somebody else's model, you're not following somebody else's advice. You're learning from people, but you're making it your own. So I think let's, in our next conversation, let's talk a little bit about how that actually works, and what the process is.
And before we end, I would like to share a little idiom. There's a story about a guy who actually he's going on a journey, and his car breaks down, and he basically, you know, this was in the days before we had mobiles, and he thinks, well, what do I do now? And he sees a house in the distance, so he thinks to himself, oh, I'll go there and see if I can use their telephone. So he gets out of his car and he kind of tracks down the road, and eventually gets to the house, and he knocks on the door. And when the owner opens the door, he says to him, take your telephone and shove it where the sun doesn't shine. And that is the truism for the way the brain works. It's based on your response. So I don't think about the guy will be, you know, offer me a cup of coffee or even something to drink, and then very generously say, make your call. No, we tell him to shove his telephone. So we need to almost get over that, get over ourselves when it comes to the way we think about it.
Get out of your own way, basically. And
exactly. You're in your own way. Anyway.
Well, thank you, Allan.
Thank you.
That's great. And like, you know, as it's, you know, for those people who are watching this, if there's anything that resonates with you, please comment and interact with us and have a chat. We'll start working people's comments and questions, everything into our conversations. And you know, you know, great things start with a single conversation. So reach out to us and just have a chat. We might be able to partner with you to make a big difference. And you know, talk about a great partnership. I'm really enjoying these, and you enjoy your day, Allan. I appreciate you.
Thank you. It was really great to see you again. I look forward to the next one. Thank you, CD. Cheers.
Bye.